you, Javier, and thank you for inviting me. Javier said I could speak for as long as I wanted, as long as it was in Spanish. So, por favor, disculpen mi español. Como crecí en Houston, es un poco Spanglish y un poco Tex-Mex. That's about all I can do, sorry. I lived, worked, and played alongside Latinos in Texas. As a teenager, I worked alongside immigrants, mowing lawns and putting in landscaping around businesses. I remember once asking one of the immigrant workers how much he was being paid. ¿Cuánto le pagan por el trabajo? He responded, $3. I responded, yo también, $3 per hora? He shook his head, no, he said, per día. At a young age, I came to understand that it makes a difference, whether you are a documented immigrant or an undocumented immigrant, that the existence was not easy for undocumented immigrants, but that opportunity in America somehow trumped even the poor living conditions and low pay. I wondered what circumstances must have been like in his country to choose an admittedly tough life in the shadows. Growing up in Texas, I never met a Latino who wasn't working. In school, everyone took Spanish, so I did. I sometimes wish I'd paid a little more attention, as you can probably tell by my Spanish so far. As a teenager, though, I wasn't always the model citizen that I am today. So in middle school Spanish class, my exuberance sometimes overcame my restraint, and I would be asked to go to the principal's office. Well, my Spanish teacher would scold me, and she would say, "En boca cerrada no entran moscas." And that... Cuando no lo escuchaba, I would often be sent to the principal's office. Now, in those days, we had corporal punishment, which didn't really work that well. After a few such trips to the principal's office, I discovered that my Spanish teacher was married to the assistant principal, and they were getting a divorce. So whenever I was sent to the principal's office, I would make the executive decision to go to the assistant principal's office, and he and I would commiserate. He'd say, "Oh, man, yeah, she's crazy. You're right, kid. Just go back there tomorrow, sit here, and you're fine. No corporal punishment today." As a consequence, I never became proficient with my Spanish, even after I had years of it in school, which I'm embarrassed that I'm not very conversational. But I spent a great deal of time in detention, unfortunately. In college, I read Miguel de Unamuno in English. I think he gives Republicans some good advice, though. He wrote, "Miremos más que somos padres de nuestro porvenir que no hijos de nuestro pasado." Republicans need to become, thank you. Republicans need to become parents of a new future with Latino voters, or we will need to resign ourselves to being a permanent minority status. The Republican Party has insisted for years that we stand for freedom and family values. I'm proud of my party when we stand for both. I think a lot of Latino voters agree with us on these issues, but Republicans have pushed them away with harsh rhetoric over immigration. Immigration is a contentious issue in American politics. In our zeal for border control, we have sometimes obscured our respect and admiration for immigrants and their contribution to America. Republicans have been losing both the respect and votes of a group of people who already identify with many of our beliefs in family and faith and conservative values. Hispanics should be a natural and sizable part of the Republican base. But they've steadily drifted away from the GOP in each election. I think this says more about Republicans than it does about Hispanics. Whether we are discussing hard work, respect for life, or quest for freedom, immigrants bring with them the same values that previous generations of immigrants did. Defense of the unborn, defense of traditional marriage are Republican issues that should resonate with Latinos, but have been obscured by the perception that Republicans are hostile to immigrants. Somewhere along the line, Republicans have failed to understand and articulate that immigrants are an asset to America, not a liability. My German great-grandparents didn't speak much English when they came to America. They didn't have much, but they also didn't ask for much. All they wanted was opportunity. They began in America peddling vegetables. They finally got that opportunity when they started a dairy business in their garage, which with all the rules now you would never be able to do. They scraped together a living, raising a family and constantly working to give their children a better life. My great-grandfather came to America in the 1880s. His father died 6 months later. So at 14, my great-grandfather was alone in America. He survived and ultimately thrived in this new country with a new language. In their home and their church, they spoke German. Republicans who criticize the use of two languages, I think, make a great mistake. As a son of immigrants, my grandfather, who had only an 8th grade education, would live to see his own children all go to college. They became ministers and professors, doctors, accountants, and one of them became a congressman. My family's story is like that of many of millions of others who came to this country. Every generation of immigrants wants these opportunities. Many have faced intolerance and bigotry. It wasn't always easy being a German American in the face of 2 world wars started by Germans. Intolerance is not new, and it's not limited to your language or the skin color. Through our rich history, and for many millions of immigrants who came to America, sacrifice and hardship were worth it. They wanted what all Americans want, better lives for themselves, their children, and grandchildren. The American dream, for it to be achievable for all, we have to have an educational system that believes that all students have the ability to succeed. Unfortunately, the education establishment seems to casually discard Latinos, blacks, and others into crummy schools with no hope. I argue that the struggle for a good education is the civil rights issue of our era. I love the story of Jaime Escalante. Anybody remember it, the movie Standing Tall? That's it, Standing Delivering. In the area of East LA, in 1982, in an environment that values a quick fix on education over learning, Escalante was a new math teacher at Garfield High School. He was determined to change the system, to challenge the students to a higher level of achievement. Many, if not most, of his students were Hispanic. He was at first not well liked by the students. He received numerous taunts and threats. But as the year progressed, he was able to win over the attention of students by implementing innovative teaching techniques. He transformed even some of the most troublesome teens into dedicated students. While Escalante was teaching basic arithmetic and algebra, he realized that his students had far greater potential. He decided to teach them calculus. To do so, he held summer courses in pre-calculus, and despite concerns and skepticism of other teachers who said, "You can't teach logarithms to illiterates," Escalante nonetheless develops a program in which his students can eventually take AP Calculus in their senior year. Taking the AP Calculus exam in the spring of their senior year, his students are relieved and overjoyed to find that they have all passed, a feat done by few in the state. My dream is that we transform the education monopoly into a thriving, competitive environment where Hispanic students get to choose what school they attend and that no student is forgotten or ignored. America's strength has always been that we are a melting pot with room for those who dare to dream. I've seen this firsthand, what it's like for new immigrants in Texas when I was growing up there. I've never met an immigrant looking for a free lunch. The question is, how do we reflect this in our 21st century immigration policy? It's absolutely vital for both the success of our immigration policy and for the purposes of national security that we do secure our border. Not to stop most immigrants from coming, we welcome them, and in fact, we should seek to increase legal immigration. I think it's absolutely vital that the Republican Party embrace more legal immigration. Unfortunately, like many of the debates in Washington, immigration has become a stalemate, where both sides are imprisoned by their own rhetoric or attached to sacred cows that prevent the possibility of a balanced solution. Immigration will not occur until conservative Republicans, like myself, become part of the solution. That's why I'm here today, to begin that conversation and to be part of the solution. I think the conversation needs to start by acknowledging that we aren't going to deport 12 million illegal immigrants. If you wish to work if you wish to live and work in America, then we will find a place for you. In order to bring conservatives to this cause, however, those who work for reform must understand that a real solution must ensure that our borders are secure. We must also treat those who are here already with understanding and compassion without also unduly rewarding them for coming illegally. The first part of my plan, border security, must be certified by the Border Patrol and an investigator general. And then, a little different than the bipartisan plan, I think it needs to come back to Congress and be voted on each year for several years. It's been the big complaint of conservatives that when we normalized people back in 1986, we never got a good border, and we got 11 million new people. So we want a report that really comes back and is voted on by Congress each year. Some may object to this, but if we don't, I don't think you'll get conservatives on board, which I think we need to get everybody on board that this is good for the country. I call this plan Trust But Verify. With this in place, I think conservatives will accept what needs to come next, an issue that must be addressed. What becomes of the 12 million undocumented workers in the United States? My plan is very simple. It will include work visas for those who are here and are willing to come forward and work. A bipartisan panel would determine the number of visas per year. High-tech visas would be expanded and have a priority. Special entrepreneurial visas would also be issued. Fairness is a key in any meaningful immigration reform, but this fairness will cut both ways. The modernization of our visa system and our border security would allow us to accurately track immigration. It would also enable us to let more people in and allow us to admit we are not going to deport the millions of people who are already here. This is where prudence, compassion, and thrift all point towards the same goal: bringing these workers out of the shadows and into becoming and being tax-paying members of society. Imagine 12 million people are already here coming out of the shadows to become new taxpayers. 12 million more people assimilating into society. 12 million more people becoming productive contributors. Conservatives, myself included, though, are wary of amnesty. In fact, if you read the news already, I think I'm already being accused of, and I haven't even given my speech yet. Amnesty is kind of who wants to make up the definition. But I'd say what we have now is de facto amnesty. The solution doesn't have to be amnesty or deportation. Maybe there's a middle ground that we call probation, where those who came illegally, who did break the law, have a period that they have to go through called a probationary period. My plan will not, though, and this is where I disagree with some in the bipartisan plan, will not impose a national ID card. It will also not have mandatory E-Verify. I don't mind if there's E-Verify that's maybe related to the tax code somehow, but I don't like the idea of making every business owner a policeman. Because if you do, subconsciously, your thinking is, well, it's more of a hassle to hire the brown person because the brown person may be here illegally. Even if I do the E-Verify, I may get punished. The punishment may be an enormous fine. I don't really like that way the E-Verify is set up unless it's voluntary or unless there's a way to attach it somehow to your tax status. But I don't think that we should be unfair to those who came to our country legally, nor should we force business owners to become immigration inspectors, making them do the job the federal government has failed to do. In my plan, after an inspector general has verified that the border is secure, the report comes back and is voted on by Congress. In year 2, we could begin expanding more visas to more immigrants who are willing to work. I would have Congress vote each year for at least 5 years whether to approve or not approve a report on whether or not we are securing the border. I think it's the only way you'll get people to believe that this time we truly will secure the border. We should be proud, though, that so many people want to come to America, that it's still seen as the land of opportunity. Let's make it a land of legal work, though, not black market jobs. Let's make it a land of work, not welfare. Our land should be one of assimilation, not of hiding in the shadows. On immigration, common sense and decency have been neglected for far too long. Let's secure our borders, welcome our new neighbors, and practice the values of freedom and family for all to see. Now, some say to generalize about any ethnic group is to be a racist. Now, there's a hilarious episode on Seinfeld. Any Seinfeld fans? Where Jerry admits that he loves Asian women, but he frets and he worries. He says, is it racist to like a certain race? So it is with trepidation that I'd like to express my admiration today for the romance of the Latin culture. I'm a great fan of Gabriel Garcia Marquez. In Love in the Time of Cholera, I think Marquez, probably inadvertently, gives some advice that Republicans might consider. He says, human beings are not born once and for all on the day their mothers give birth to them. Life obliges them over and over again to give birth to themselves. Likewise, Republicans need to give birth to a new attitude towards immigrants, an attitude that sees immigrants as assets, not liabilities. No one captures the romance of the Latin culture more than Pablo Neruda. Now, my staff tried to take this part out of the speech. They said, what do a bunch of businessmen and women want to hear you recite Pablo Neruda in a language that's really not your language? However, I'm up here all the time. My wife is in another state, and I love this poem. You've probably all heard it before. Si tu me olvidas. It issues a passionate threat, but ends by saying, pero si cada día, cada hora, sientes que a mí está destinada. Con dulzura implacable, si cada día sube una flor a tus labios a buscarme. Ay, amor mío, ay mía, en mí todo ese fuego se repite. En mí nada se apaga ni se olvida. How can we not embrace such passion? How can we not want that culture to merge with and infuse the American spirit? See, because some people think we're kind of boring, so we need a little bit of romance. They're not called the romance languages for no reason. As we move forward on immigration reform, I, for one, will work to find a solution that both adheres to the rule of law and makes room for compassion. My hope is that today we begin a dialogue between the GOP and Latinos, a dialogue that shows that the GOP sees all immigrants as assets and that Latinos can come to see the GOP as a party of opportunity, the party of the American dream, el partido del sueño americano. Thank you very much.